Welcome to TradeTheNBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 27th. A slight rebound again. Magenta is over yellow. Not a surprise. We're still floating around there in this indecision period. Now the fight with the Fed governor and kind of an interesting juxtaposition that's sort of set up because now she's going to fight the firing by Trump, and the Fed says it will go by the court ruling, but if they don't remove her now and the courts uphold Trump's firing of her, anything that she does while she's there technically is a violation. So how is that going to work? Who knows? And will that be the justification for Trump to fire Powell for allowing it? So it's a complicated setup, and of course the markets don't like that because they're uncertain as to what's going to happen and who Trump is going to replace and fill these voids with, because now it looks like he's going to end up with the majority, economist-wise, relatively speaking, if they're actually in agreement with his views on things. When we look at DOC readings, you've got DOC green here rising over. We're going to look for this crossover of cyan to green. That's going to become important because a rejection here would be more weakness coming back to our 76% line. But green crossing back over is definitely going to mean new highs built into it. Now, the shakeout, this is pretty weak. This is where we get into those odd periods where you're not congruent because now we're seeing much lower shakeout. We're still holding at the same value. So any rise to new highs, you need to see a higher shakeout reading than this. And that's something we talked about. If we make new highs but don't get the higher shakeout, you've got a divergence that will correct. And so that's something we'll definitely be watching from an NQ standpoint. Stronger from an MBI reading, but not relative to price action. So there's still more shorting going on within the buyers that are set up in it. And of course, you got end of month next few days, and that's going to have a broader impact as we get into September. But you can see from a rate standpoint, nothing happening as far as that goes. So it's pretty much a null. And of course, oil retracing back into here. So we're still caught in the zero zone of not too high, not too low, but it certainly isn't going to push an economy any further. And then, of course, we talked about the energy bifurcation that still exists and is going to have an impact. The euro is still holding up at an unreasonable level because they still believe that inflation is just around the corner for the tariff situation. Though the Budget Office did have to admit that it will reduce up to almost $4 trillion in reduction in deficits and or borrowing costs of almost $1 trillion, which is crazy, but significant. The question is, can they ever slow down their spending or stop it? The answer is no. And we know what happens with that. The utility of it becomes futile, where you're spending higher in deficits and getting lower growth. The ratio just doesn't match. When you look at the GDP deficit to debt issuing versus what the economy is actually growing at, unless you're getting over the 3% range or higher, it's a lose. And until they work that out, you're just digging a deeper hole. It just takes more time. Yes, you could theoretically grow out. And this was back, I remember from the 80s, they were crying about $300 billion deficits during Reagan. And, obviously once the economy grew past that, you ended up with budget surpluses by the early 90s. We haven't seen those days since because you've not had a serious control where people actually, think about, what they're spending because they don't see any monetary value in the dollar other than just you can keep making more of them. From a gold standpoint, though, that's going to continue to be the impetus to push things further, though we're looking at a potential little bit of weakness here if MBI white takes the lead and magenta fades a little bit more. Not happening yet. We're still in a rising gold, so that should be enough to sustain it. Turning to the crypto world, Bitcoin still dealing from that big whale selling, so much of its position, but literally all it did was fill back positive extremes and then move back to the yellow versions right here. But that's also kind of a matching shakeout reading relative to the markets. It's just seen a bit more of a dip, but it was also a downside gain improved over the market in general, and ETH still not suffering anywhere near that. So you can see the excitement shift has been towards ETH. And it's probably not going to change. From our overall view here, you had the rise, 50% retrace, and move back up. So A, B, C. Pretty classic. And still with Magenta leading, and now you're well above 33. And you've moved to positive shakeout, so that keeps things humming along. So pretty clean action. I don't think any of this is outside normal behavior, despite what you might hear from the squawking heads that are always going to be going on about it. But you can see that you had the reversal. We talked about this earlier in the week. You had put action leading, and now you have the call buyers flipping them, neutralizing the effect. Pretty clean. Just happens regularly. Asian session was just a nothing burger, and here in the EU session there pulled back a little bit. So more of the same, but still the volatility is decent. Can't complain about that. It's just sort of rudderless at this particular stage until some kind of solid development takes place. And again, they're still working through the whole oil backlog. And these were all the things that were set up in the Biden administration that we said were going to be delays, and they haven't been able to overcome them. And so throw in the court battles and stuff, it has just pushed everything further down the road. So we'll continue to follow it. As always, though, anything relevant, I'll put it on our team chat. Have a good one. Trade well.